He didn't speak for an hour. Then, with tears in his eyes, he pointed at the woman who claimed to be his guardian and said one word: "Liar." What followed exposed a truth the system had buried, and a boy the world almost forgot. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The rain hadn't stopped for hours. It fell in soft sheets against the windows of the small neighborhood police station. Officer Miles Rowan sat at his desk, nursing a half-empty cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The night was supposed to be quiet, just another slow shift with nothing but paperwork and weather reports. Then the door slammed open. A woman stood in the entrance, drenched from head to toe. Her clothes clung to her, soaked through, and her hands trembled as she held tightly to the arm of a small boy. The boy was barefoot. His green t-shirt stuck to his tiny body, and his wet curls dripped water onto the floor. He was walking alone, on the sidewalk, the woman said between gasps. No shoes, crying. I couldn't just leave him there. Officer Miles stood quickly, setting his cup aside. "Come in. Let's get him warm first." The woman nodded and led the boy forward. He didn't speak. He didn't look up. He just held the woman's hand like it was the last safe thing in the world. A blanket was found, soft and thick. The boy was wrapped in it gently. A young assistant brought hot cocoa, placing it on the table with a soft smile. Miles crouched down to eye level, speaking softly. "My name's Miles. I'm here to help, okay? You don't have to talk yet." The boy didn't answer. His lips trembled slightly, but no sound came out. Fear was thick in his eyes, far too much for someone so young. They sat like that for several minutes. The room stayed quiet, the only sound being the rain tapping the windows. Not long after, a youth counselor named Nadia Brooks arrived. She was young, kind-eyed, and carried a soft warmth with her. She knelt beside the boy and smiled gently. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm Nadia. We're just here to help, that's all. Can you tell us your name?" The boy kept his eyes on the cocoa. He didn't speak or nod, but he didn't pull away either. Miles and Nadia shared a glance. The silence stretched on. They didn't push. They waited. Nearly an hour passed. The boy stayed wrapped in the blanket, holding the warm cup in his small hands, though he hadn't taken a sip. Then, as Nadia gently reached out to check a small scrape on his elbow, he flinched. A tiny sob escaped his lips. It was so sudden, so soft it almost didn't sound real. "Please," he whispered. Nadia froze. Miles leaned in, his voice steady. "Please what, buddy?" The boy shook his head. Tears filled his eyes and he pressed his face into the blanket. The word had slipped out, but the rest remained locked inside. "Not her," he whispered next. Miles and Nadia looked at each other. Their expressions turned serious. Before they could say anything else, the front door creaked open again. A tall woman stepped inside, dry and composed. Her umbrella was neatly folded and her blazer looked freshly pressed. Her hair was pulled back tightly. She walked directly to the front desk. "I'm here for Evan," she said to the officer at the counter. "He wandered off during dinner. I'm his guardian." Miles stood up from where he'd been crouched. "Your name?" he asked. "Marla Jensen," she replied. "I have full custody. You can check the paperwork." Nadia turned to the boy. "Is your name Evan?" The boy looked up at the woman, then at Nadia. He started to cry, not loudly, but with deep, silent sobs that shook his little shoulders. Nadia reached for his hand. "Evan, do you know this woman?" The boy stood up slowly, the blanket slipping from his shoulders. His hand pointed at the woman. "She lied," he said. The room went completely still. Miles moved toward Marla, his voice calm but firm. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to wait in the hallway for a few minutes." Marla's smile faded just slightly. "He's scared, that's all. He doesn't understand. I have legal custody. We'll confirm that," Miles replied, nodding to another officer who approached Marla to escort her outside. As the door closed behind her, Nadia looked back at the boy. She crouched again to meet his eyes. "What's your real name, sweetheart?" The boy wiped his face with the sleeve of the blanket. His voice was small but clear this time. "Jonah," he said. Miles blinked. He turned to his computer and typed quickly. There was no foster record under the name Marla Jensen and no child named Jonah listed in her current file. He checked again. Nothing matched. He turned to Nadia, his voice low. He shouldn't be with her. She's not listed anywhere. Nadia nodded slowly. We need to find out where he came from and why he was alone in the street tonight. Miles looked back at Jonah. The boy stood quietly, a little less frightened now, but still guarded. He had said only a few words, but they were enough. They were about to uncover something far bigger than they expected, and it all started with a boy in the rain. The hallway, outside the interview room, was quiet, but the tension inside the station had grown thicker. Officer Miles Rowan sat across from Jonah, who was now wrapped in a fresh, dry hoodie, a small bandage on his elbow. The boy still clutched the blanket from earlier, pressing it to his chest like a shield. Nadia Brooks, the youth counselor, sat nearby with a clipboard resting in her lap. She hadn't written much. Instead, she watched Jonah carefully, offering soft words here and there, but mostly giving him space. "Jonah," she said gently, "can you tell us anything about her? The woman who came in?" Jonah didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked to the door, then back down to his hands. Finally, he whispered, "She's not supposed to have me." Miles leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean, buddy?" "I was taken away," Jonah said, barely audible. "They said I was going to a better home." Nadia met Miles's eyes. She spoke calmly. "Jonah, what's her name? The woman who says she's your guardian." "Marla," he said. "Marla Jensen." Miles stood up and moved to his desk. He typed quickly into the state foster care system. Marla's name appeared, but the record was outdated. She had temporary custody of one child 6 months ago. No follow-up. No renewal. No current placement. Jonah's name was nowhere to be found in connection to her. Miles picked up the phone and called Child Protective Services. After a brief hold, a tired voice answered. "Theo Lance speaking, case management. This is Officer Miles Rowan at Station 12. I have a child here named Jonah. He was found wandering alone, and a woman named Marla Jensen came claiming custody. Her name is in your records, but nothing current." The line was silent for a few moments. "Marla Jensen," Theo muttered. "Wait, that's... Hold on." There was the sound of rapid typing on a keyboard. "Her temporary license expired last fall. She wasn't approved for any ongoing placement after that." "What's the child's full name?" "He just said Jonah. He didn't give a last name." "There's no Jonah listed under her file," Theo confirmed. "In fact, that name hasn't come up in recent placements at all." Miles hung up slowly and turned to Nadia. "She's not a legal guardian. She hasn't been for months." Jonah looked up. "Am I in trouble?" he asked quietly. Nadia knelt beside him. "No, sweetheart, you are not in trouble. You did the right thing by speaking up." Jonah looked unsure. "She said, if I talked, they'd send me back. To the first house." Nadia's voice softened even more. "What happened in the first house?" He hesitated, then said, "The man there used a belt when he got mad. He said I ruined everything." Miles clenched, his jaw. He took a slow breath and sat back down. "And what about Marla? Did she hurt you?" Jonah nodded. "She put me in the laundry room. Sometimes she'd lock it. Said I needed to be quiet. Said no one wanted me." Nadia felt her heart break. She placed a hand gently on Jonah's shoulder. "You didn't deserve any of that, Jonah." Outside the room, another officer stood near Marla, who was now pacing with arms folded. "You can't keep me here," she said sharply. "I have every right to collect the child. I've taken care of him." "We're verifying your paperwork," the officer replied. Marla narrowed her eyes. "I passed every home inspection. I did everything right." Miles stepped into the hallway. "You're not listed in the current system," he said. "Your foster license expired. The child is not legally placed with you. That's a mistake, Marla snapped. The paperwork must not have been updated. We'll let child services sort it out. Until then, you'll wait here. Back inside the interview room, Jonah curled into the chair again. The blanket pulled around his legs. Do you know your last name, Jonah? Nadia asked. He nodded. Jonah Ellis. Miles returned and pulled up that name in the system. Within seconds, he found a report. Jonah Ellis had been removed from a previous home under urgent circumstances. He was supposed to be reassigned, but disappeared from the follow-up list. No final placement was listed. He vanished from the records. Miles said quietly to Nadia, "The case fell through the cracks." Nadia looked down at Jonah, who had begun to draw in the corner of a page she had given him. It was a small house with no windows. "I think she kept him hidden," Nadia whispered. "She didn't want to lose her spotless record." Miles nodded. "And nobody checked close enough." He went back to the main desk and made another call. This time, he asked for the district attorney's on-call office. "We may be dealing with unlawful custody and possible child abuse," he said into the phone. "We need to start a deeper investigation." As the call ended, he glanced toward Jonah, who now looked less frightened, though his shoulders were still tense. Nadia leaned in and said, "You're safe now. We believe you." Jonah looked up slowly. "Do I have to go back to her?" "No," Miles said firmly from the doorway. "Not now. Not ever." In that moment, Jonah nodded. For the first time since entering the station, he believed it too. The truth was quiet, but it had finally been heard. The next morning, the sky was still gray, but the rain had finally stopped. At the small police station, the energy had shifted. What started as a quiet night had turned into something much bigger. Officer Miles. Rowan walked into the briefing room holding a stack of printed reports. Each page told a piece of a story that had stayed hidden for too long. Jonah was now staying at a nearby child recovery center. Nadia Brooks had taken him there late the night before. She stayed with him until he fell asleep, curled up on a small bed with a stuffed elephant one of the nurses had given him. Back at the station, Miles met with a new visitor. Her name was Elin Waver, a child advocacy officer with sharp eyes and a calm voice. She had worked with difficult cases before, but something about this one felt different to her. "We've confirmed it," Miles said, handing her the report. Marla Jensen wasn't supposed to have Jonah. She manipulated the gaps in the system. No one followed up after her temporary license expired. Elin scanned the papers. "And no one noticed the missing transfer?" "Not until Jonah walked into the station," Miles replied. Meanwhile, social media had picked up the story. Someone had shared a photo, blurry for privacy, of a small boy in a green hoodie pointing with tears in his eyes. The caption read, "He said one word." It was enough. The image spread fast. Under the post, hundreds of comments poured in. Some were angry, some were heartbroken, many offered support. At the recovery center, Nadia sat with Jonah in the playroom. He didn't talk much, but he listened. He had drawn a picture earlier that morning, a small figure locked in a room with no light. She looked at it quietly, then asked, "Is that how it felt?" Jonah nodded. "Did anyone else live in the house with you?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just me. And her. Sometimes she had visits from people, but she never let them talk to me." "Would you feel okay if we talked to other children who lived with her before?" Nadia asked softly. "You wouldn't have to do anything, we'd just talk." Jonah was quiet for a long time. Then he whispered, "There was a girl. Her name was Megan. She left one night. I never saw her again." Nadia made a note and passed it along to Elin, who began searching old files. After some digging, they found 2 children who had been placed with Marla in the past. Both had left her care suddenly. One had moved across the state. The other had no explanation in the file, just the word unreliable under behavior notes. Elin reached out. The first was a boy named Liam, now 12. His foster records showed he'd made a complaint about Marla nearly a year ago. He had said she locked him in the basement as punishment. His caseworker had marked the claim as emotional exaggeration. When Elin asked if he would talk again, Liam said yes. She was fake nice, he told her over a video call. Smiled when people came to visit. But she got mean when the door closed. Said we were lucky she even kept us. Elin wrote every word down. She had heard similar things in other cases, but this one felt like it had been ignored more than most. Later that day, Elin met with Judge Camille Royce, who had taken over the investigation. The judge was serious and steady. She read over the file in silence, then looked up. Too many people looked away, she said. This child was silenced by the very system that promised to protect him. At the center, Jonah was starting to open up. He began drawing new pictures. Trees, sunshine, a house with open windows. They weren't all happy, but they were changing. One afternoon, as Nadia handed him a juice box, Jonah looked at her and asked, "Am I still a secret?" Nadia shook her head. "Not anymore. You're being heard now." Officer Miles stopped by that evening with a small box of toy police cars. "Only brave kids get these," he said with a smile. Jonah took one and gave a small grin in return. The next morning, the court began early. Marla Jensen was brought in wearing a clean jacket and stiff expression. She sat behind a table, her lawyer whispering beside her. Judge Royce entered the room, her eyes sharp and direct. Elin gave her report. Nadia testified. Jonah's name was protected, but his voice was there in every word they spoke. They showed drawings. They read statements. They played a short audio clip from Liam, describing how Marla punished him for being too loud. Judge Royce listened closely. When it was time to speak, she leaned forward. This court recognizes that a child's voice, even quiet, even whispered, carries great weight. It is unacceptable that this voice was ignored. Marla's face stayed still, but her hands gripped the edge of the table. The judge ordered Marla to remain in custody. Charges included unlawful custody, neglect, and falsifying records. But the work wasn't done. Elin and Nadia knew other children might still be out there unheard. They planned to revisit old files and reopen dismissed reports. Back at the recovery center, Jonah was coloring again. This time he drew 4 people standing in front of a tree. When asked who they were, he pointed. "You," he said to Nadia, "and Officer Miles. And me." "Who's the 4th?" Nadia asked with a smile. Jonah looked up. "Someone I haven't met yet." 2 weeks had passed since Jonah first arrived at the station, soaked from the rain. The world outside was changing. Fast. Headlines had spread. People were asking questions. And Marla Jensen remained behind bars awaiting trial. But inside the recovery center, things moved slowly and gently. Jonah was still quiet. He spoke more than he used to, but not by much. He preferred to draw. His drawings now showed sunshine, sometimes people holding hands. The locked doors and dark rooms were fewer. Nadia visited every day. Sometimes they read stories. Sometimes they just sat. Jonah had started to ask small questions, like what her favorite color was or what police officers ate for lunch. One day he asked, "Do people always go away?" Nadia didn't lie. Sometimes they do, but the good ones try to stay. He nodded slowly. Then he whispered, "I hope you stay." Officer Miles came by often too. He brought puzzle books, toy badges, and once even brought his old police cap. "Only the bravest kids get to wear this," he said, placing it on Jonah's head. Jonah smiled, not big, but real. One afternoon, Miles pulled Nadia aside. "There's someone I want him to meet, someone who might be a good fit." Nadia raised her eyebrows. "Who?" "Her name is Tessa Malloy. Former school counselor, fostered 2 kids before, both are grown now. She's been through every background check twice." "And you trust her?" "I do," he said. "But more importantly, she listens. Like really, listens." 2 days later, Tessa arrived at the center. She had short curly hair, kind eyes, and wore a necklace with a silver locket. She walked in without a clipboard or paperwork, just a gentle smile and a bag of books. Jonah looked at her carefully from the playroom corner. She sat on the floor a few feet away, cross-legged, and said nothing for a few minutes. Then she asked, "Do you like grilled cheese?" Jonah blinked, unsure how to answer. "I'm terrible at making it," Tessa added, smiling. "But maybe you can teach me." Jonah gave a soft laugh, his first one in a long time. Over the next few days, Tessa kept visiting. She didn't rush him. She let him draw, told him funny stories about her 2 old cats, and brought a small notebook where they wrote silly names for sandwiches together. She never asked him about the past. She waited for him to bring things up on his own. After a week, Jonah reached out and took her hand during one visit. Nadia saw it happen from the other side of the glass and felt tears prick her eyes. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world. As Marla's court date approached, Judge Camille Royce prepared for a full hearing. More evidence had come in, altered home reports, missed visits, and old phone logs that were never filed. Marla's lawyer tried to argue confusion, but the truth was clear. In court, Elin gave her testimony and Nadia shared her sessions with Jonah. Jonah's drawings were entered as quiet proof of what he couldn't say in words. Even Miles spoke, calm and steady, about the night Jonah arrived and how that one word, liar, started everything. The judge's ruling was firm. This child, and others like him, were failed by a system built to protect them. This court will not fail them again. Marla was denied bail. She would face trial under charges of neglect, unlawful custody, and falsifying state records. A few weeks later, Jonah's 8th birthday arrived. Tessa hosted a small gathering in her backyard. There were balloons, simple games, and homemade cupcakes that were a little too sweet but still perfect. Nadia came with a gift, a book about brave animals. Miles brought a blue cap with the word hero stitched on the front. Jonah wore it the whole day. At one point during the party, Jonah tugged on Nadia's sleeve and pointed to a photo sitting on the table. It showed him with Tessa, Miles, and Nadia, all smiling together in front of a tree. "This," he said softly, "feels like a real family." Nadia knelt beside him. "That's because it is." Later that night, Miles returned to the station. The building was quiet again, much like it had been the night Jonah first arrived. He opened his locker and found a paper bag inside. It held the small green t-shirt Jonah had worn that night, washed, folded, and tagged from evidence. Miles didn't throw it out. He placed it gently on the top shelf of his locker, not as a file, not as a report, but as a reminder that sometimes a single word, spoken by the smallest voice, can change everything. And in Jonah's case, it did.